Hey, the last few weeks we've been talking about "You Are Here," and we're going to continue this week and next week. And just I don't want to take too much time, but I do feel like we need to back up just a tad, put some things on the board, and then we can work forward today of where we're at. And so if you've been with us or you've watched online, you've seen how we've had this little quadrant grid set up. But today we're going to focus more on the love, on that right relationship with God. But I do want to draw some things up here so we all are on the same page. And so we'll give ourselves more room here. But, you know, we talked about that we begin here and then we go over here and sometimes we bounce down here. But where we really want to be is here. And we want to live in this love relationship. And just as a little reminder that we talked about that, you know, that you begin born, that you can't do anything on your own. You got to have somebody. And so our parents, our people take care of us. And then we move, we get kicked out. We can't stay there. Now, some people choose to go back to Lost. That they decide that the world's not worth living in, and so they go back over here and they live in isolation. Right here. Now, the law is what we've been taught. You know, we talked about that, you know, it starts out as don't run with sharp stuff, don't eat glue, but we also learn the commandments that, you know, we're going to love God and love people, that we'll put another God before our God. And we learn those things, but for some people, it's really not law that they get into. They end up feeling like it's rules. And they feel like, who are you to tell me how to live? Who are you to tell me how I'm supposed to do these things? And so they don't take them to this love relationship, which is where we want to go. What they end up doing is they jump down here to lust, and they want to do it their way. And this is where we get the people, the pills, and pizza. And that's where we stay there, that we use people, we use substance, we use anything that numbs, because we've got this hole in our heart. We're created that way. We've got this hole in our heart that's got to be filled, and we long for this heart relationship, this right relationship with God. But, you know, the law leaves us short, and the people, pills, and pizzas live us. There's just only so long we can self-medicate. And then we still are left longing. And when we get here to love, what we started talking about last week was holy. That God is a holy God. And He is putting us in a holy relationship. So what does this right relationship really look like? Well, in 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 9 through 10, and this has been a verse we've used since the first week. And this is going to be up on the screen there. It says, "But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praise of Him who called you out of darkness into His wonderful light." You are a royal priesthood. Now, that pairing is kind of funny because we don't think of priest in royalty context. And when we think of royalty, you know, for me, I say we, but for me, when I'm thinking of royalty, I think of the purple. I think of being better than, and in a system to where we honor those people. And so all of a sudden, God's calling us this royal priesthood, almost like this perfect servant leader that He's calling us out to be more than we have been on our own. But for some of us, this holy relationship that God is calling us to, for some of us, this holy relationship, we don't quite get it. We've been living in a term where our relationship with God was merely a get-out-of-jail-free card. That our relationship with Him was really based on, listen, I know that I'm supposed to do something. I'm going to show up every once in a while. I'm going to give a little. But my relationship with you is not about total dependence on you, but more just I know who you are. And so it's this get out of jail free. But one of the things we want to write down here under love is in this holy is dependent. That what we're really looking for in this relationship is that you and I begin to live in dependency of Him. Now, we talked about that you and I are people of wherewithal. You know, you got hired because you could do a task. You got hired at your job because you have abilities. You have something. You're a get-her-done crew. You can get things and get them accomplished, and we get hired for that. Competency is what we get hired for. But God He crafted us, He made us, He knows us, He gave us these abilities. He's thrilled with your abilities and talents, and He created them. He knows them. He made you. However, He doesn't want you making yourself. He wants you to allow Him to shape you. He wants me to surrender. So when we sing that song, White Flag, it really is about you and I living in dependence. So this holy God, there are two characteristics of this holy, what God's holiness is, and it is unique and it is pure. That God is totally unique. There is none like Him. He was not created, He always was. That there is nothing we can compare to Him. And that He is totally 100% pure, and that He cannot be in the presence of evil. He cannot be in the presence of sin. In fact, it's almost like He's allergic to it. He cannot be around it. And that God, for whatever reason, so loves us. Back in that verse in Peter that talked about, he says, "You are my special possession, my holy priesthood." That He looks at us and says, "I love you and I want to be in fellowship with you." So how does this holy God bridge the gap between where you and I are living, fallen and sinful man? And so He had to come up with this perfect sacrifice to lift us up to holiness in this eternal relationship. For many of us, we spend our whole life in the physical realm. That's where we think it's just right now. You know, in my mid-40s now, up until the last few years, I did not think, talk, or plan, or dream about retirement, right? I mean, when you first come out of college or high school and you start working, you think retirement is 1,000 years away. You think you've got time. And then one day you wake up and your knees don't bend. And it's in that one moment you realize, what am I going to do in the future? And then, and I tell people this all the time. This has kind of been the line that I learned, that the things that we go through in our 20s are preparing us for things in our 30s and 30s to 40s and 40s to 50s and down the line, because there's just things we cannot know and understand. No matter how talented or gifted we may be, we don't know what it's like. If you're in your 40s, we have no clue what it's like to be in our 60s or 70s. So all of you that have made it to your 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, we tip our hat. You've made it. That is amazing. I have no clue what that's like. But there's something about this maturity that we come up, and here we are, that we begin thinking in this physical world that God's really in this for eternity with us, that He loves us and wants to live in fellowship. And so in this moment that He lifts us up through this perfect sacrifice of His Son, that there's still things that we mess up on because He gives us this pure heart, but what He's also working for is for us to become mature, that we become mature in our faith, that the things that we do, the things that we say, the way we act, that even though we have pure hearts and are moving towards Him, there are also things in our maturity that we have to learn, that we just are not blessed with maturity off the bat. Now, you've heard people say they're mature beyond their years. That can be true, but for most of us, we have to learn it the hard way. I have to learn things the hard way. Usually it's got to break in my lap for me to realize it. And I have to take my lumps. I have to have my failures for me to move forward. Now, some of you, you're gifted, you've got it, and maturity comes natural. But for others, maturity takes time. It takes time, and there's no substitute for that. It just takes time. It takes effort and energy to live. So we began talking about this. What does this mean? This relates. So this perfect sacrifice comes in. Christ comes and dies on the cross for us, and we are lifted up. And this justification and regeneration and adoption, this trinity that just kind of takes place right there, that we're judiciously granted full pardon for who we are and the life we've lived in our life of sin and justified, and we're automatically regenerated, this born-again experience that happens, and then automatically we are adopted into the family, and that we get to sit at the table, and we are now known as sons and daughters of God. So we're called holy, but how do we live a holy life? How do you and I live a holy life? The work is done before us. On behalf of this perfect sacrifice, we are lifted up. But we can't just go and do whatever we want. We have to have some action to it. We've got to believe and we've got to do. And that they're almost like the bicycle sprockets. You know, our pedals on our bike. It's hard to ride a bike with one leg. You got to have both pedals pushing at the same time to make the bike go. And it's our faith and our actions, they work together there. But so here we are, these holy people that have been lifted up. But what does that mean for us? What does that mean for us? That it means that the way that we think, the way we process information, the way that we operate in our processes here, we begin to think in terms of eternity. Not just the physical world now. How does this affect eternity? How does this affect my relationships? How does this affect people? How does this affect my soul? How does this affect me? And we begin to think differently. When you're living a holy life, you think differently than the world. You are going to stand out. The world's going to look at us differently because we think differently. The way we live. The things that are, used to be important, maybe are not as important anymore. The things that we used to think were valuable may not have as much value. The things you spend your money on. If you're talking to your friends that don't have a faith story or aren't part of a church, they may talk to you about finances and about getting the new truck or the new boat or the jet skis. Or they may talk to you about this trip, and you may tell them, hey, this year we're going to do every other year, or we're going to do every 3 years, or we're going to do something different. We're going to do something a little low-key because, I've got some other plans with my money. It's going to be shocking, but the way we live affects people. The way we live, it affects our holy life. The other thing is the way we love. It's not just a physical love. It's not just a using people. It is the way that we genuinely care about somebody. The way we take care of the homeless, the down and out, the hurting. The way that we love and treat people. That sets us apart from the world. That sets us apart. Our survival instincts kick in world, right? The people around us, it's a dog-eat-dog world. People, deep down, we think we care about somebody, but if you're not in a holy, loving God relationship, it is going to be hard to love them. In fact, I would say it's impossible to love them the way that God's asked us to love them without Him. We can be kind. You may even have a little bit of compassion, but it's going to run out. It's going to run out. The way that we talk sets us apart. The way that we talk to people, the words we use, the way we talk, the stories we tell, the jokes we share, the negative, the positive. And we talk about this, and last week we said, it is really hard to be holy and cranky at the same time. The way we carry ourselves in the workplace, the way we carry ourselves in life with our family, the words we use. They mean something. They carry weight. See, you and I can't go to the mill. We can't go to work. We can't go to the family reunion. Even if you're coming here all on your own and your family's is back at the house. If you're here independently and your family is elsewhere today, or if you go to a work environment that is not necessarily holy. You're going into a work environment where you are the only believer. We can't take our holy hat off and keep it in the truck and then go to work and do whatever and say whatever we have to say to get through the day, and then get back in the truck and automatically put the holy hat back on and drive home. We can't. See, holiness begins to permeate all of these things. Holiness makes us think different, live different, love different, and talk different. Now, Jim Rohn had this quote. He says, there are two types of pain in this world that we all go through. First is the short-term pain of discipline, and second, the long-term pain of regret. One weighs ounces, the other weighs tons. Which pain do you choose? So today, what we want to talk about is all of these things and this love relationship really kind of boil down to discipline. That you and I are making decisions in our character. Our decisions in our character, the way we're going to live, the way that we're going to carry ourselves, the way we talk to people, the way we love people, the way we treat people, the way we live our life, the way we handle our money, all of these things are about decisions you and I get to make about the way we're going to handle them. If there's zero difference between us and the world, why would they want to be like us? I mean, we don't just come here. This isn't just a support group. We want to add people to the kingdom. We want more people to be a part of this life-saving, perfect sacrificial gift. We want to invite them into the same love fellowship that you and I get to be a part of. And so, but if there's zero difference between us and the world, why would they want to be a part of this? You're just wasting hours each week. So there's got to be this difference. And so in this story about these disciplines that you and I get to pay, the pain that it takes to be sacrificial in our lives and our character, that you and I get to form as characters through discipline, it takes energy, it takes effort. It just doesn't happen. We just don't magically, God sprinkles a little dust on us and he goes, boom, you're perfect. Now go live your life. You're going to make all the right decisions. He doesn't do that. He sends the Holy Spirit that whispers into our very soul. Be careful. Step back. Think about this. But he never hardwires us just to make the right decisions. He never unplugs our cables and reconfigures them to say, now you're a robot. There are gentle nudges. There are whispers. There could be some shoves. There could be some dead ends and brick walls. But never are we mechanical? And so we get this thing here, and that's character, that if we're going to live a disciplined life, what does that mean? What does this mean to live this disciplined life? Because I believe that discipline leads to maturity, and maturity leads to character. And that our character, we have to win the character battles of our life. We have to decide. You and I have to choose, we're going to win the character battles. That they're not just jump balls of life, they're the battles we have to win. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 9 through 12. It'll be up on the screen. It says this. It says, for we know in part and we prophesy in part. But when completeness comes, what is in part disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put away the ways of my childhood behind me. For now we see only a reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. That middle section there, when I was a child, I talked like a child. It is cute when you're 3. When you are 3 and we throw tantrums, there's a moment where we all go, oh, didn't get his way. When you're 19 and you do it, we want to take bats to you. When you're 50 and you do it, we don't want to be around you. There are people in your life, right, that are throwing tantrums, that they manipulate to get their way. They spin stories. They do whatever it takes because it's my way. Nobody wants to be around that. So in this holy life of maturity, it's saying we want to put away childish things. We want to mature. We want to develop our character. Because an undisciplined life will equal a character issues in our life. If we're not going to live discipline, then we might as well understand that you and I are going to have more character challenges. We're going to have more of them. Kevin Myers, the pastor of a church in Atlanta, he said this. He goes, people fail in life because of character issues. As a result, their faith, their relationships, and their careers flame out. They just flame out. He went on to say this, that character problems are like sinkholes. And sinkholes are these chasms hidden under the surface of the ground that collapse and create an open hole in the ground. So when we are living undisciplined lives in this holy pursuit, these sinkholes are developed underneath the surface. See, if we have a hole in our arm and there's stuff coming out, we tend to it immediately. As a child, we wanted the Band-Aid. Now we wrap it. We want to make sure we're putting antibiotic on it. We want to make sure it doesn't get infected because we understand, because we can see it, that hole is dangerous. We know. But when we are eroding from the inside out because of undiscipline in our life and our character issues that are coming up, because we're not living to that holy standard that we've been called to, then it's hard for us. Because if I don't see the hole must not be there. And we can erode underneath like a sinkhole and not even realize that damage for years. Because the undisciplined life takes time for it to develop. And it may not be this decision that caused the sinkhole. It may not be the 10th decision. It may not be the 25th decision, but it could be the 100th. And it's these little decisions, one by one, they pile up. And it's almost like there's a shovel digging out the hole in our chest. And see, as humans, when immediate consequences happen and they're not felt, we begin to believe that none are coming. So if you put your hand on the hot stove and it's warm, then we're like, it's not as hot as I thought. And as it heats up, ew. But if that pain's not instant, if there's not that instant burning, then we don't realize how bad it is. So we're able to leave it there. And that's what happens in our soul. In fact, what I believe happens is that we may be having success in one area of our life. We may be succeeding in one area while we're letting another area erode. If we say our spiritual life, our relationships, our personal, and maybe our work, our careers, if you have those three, and let's just say that your career takes off, making money, moving up the ranks, and that's doing well, it's easy for us as humans to say, you know what? I'm doing so well over here that I'll worry about my relationships later. Or if maybe you've fallen in love and you don't care, you don't worry about your job anymore because you're going to live on love. And you're thinking, God loves me, I love him, so we're good. He's not going to send me to hell. So I'm going to live on love for a little bit. Or the other is you just become so engrossed in God that you become of no earthly good. But there's this piece in there that we begin to rationalize in our brain that if I'm doing well in one of those areas, that's enough. But that's how we flame out. Because if we get wind of the problem, that we're succeeding in that area, it's easy for us to neglect the other. It's easy for us to say, it'll be okay. There'll be time to fix it. There's going to be time to fix it. There's going to be time. I got this. Well, N.T. Wright, one of the theologians of our day, he says this, that in the ancient world, that there were 4 characteristics that separated the Christian movement. And this is the Church of Acts. What separated the Church of Acts from all other faiths, all other traditions, all over the world, there were 4 things that made them stand out. And this one you're going to love. Patience. Now, I wish they sold those. He said that patience stood out among the others, that nobody else do this. In Colossians 3, 12 through 15, it says this. It says, therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, with kindness, with humility, with gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another. If any of you has a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord has forgave you. And over all these virtues put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, since as members of one body, you are called to peace, and be thankful. Patience. So patience stands out. These 4, the N.T. Wright said this, and I thought this is brilliant. He said, this patience, it is waiting without complaint. Waiting without complaint. Now, it seems like no big deal, but what this really kind of boils down is that we can handle discomfort. That patience means that this life is not going to go perfect. Being in a holy relationship with God does not mean it all is just a grand fairy tale. It means that there's going to be things pop up. And what separated the early church is patience. They understood that life wasn't perfect. That they learned to wait on the Lord. They learned to wait on the Lord and to trust Him. Now, when you're people of wherewithal, God's got about 5 minutes to figure it out. And then we're going to take over. And we're going to solve problems. We're going to get her done. But what separated the early church was saying, in God's time, whatever discomfort I got to put up with for a period of time, I can do, because in God's time, we can wait. And I can do it. I can endure, and I can be patient, and I can do it without complaining. The second one that N.T. Wright said was humility. He said humility separated. G.K. Chesterton said this in a quote. He said, a man was meant to be doubtful about himself, but undoubting about the truth. This has been exactly reversed. See, in our world, we begin to taught that we are the solution. That if I have enough education, if I have enough drive, if I have enough right breaks, then I can solve all my problems. And that's reverse the way we were designed. We were designed to live in dependence on Him. See, and now this is a Western issue too, us in the United States, because we believe that our money, our education, our wisdom, we believe that our divine theory, we must be right because we're Americans. God must love us more. We have houses to go to than the rest of the world. God must have a special relationship with the United States, because look what He did to India. Look what He did to China. Look what He did to Africa. God must love us more. It's no wonder most of the world wants nothing to do with us, because we're not living a life of humility and thankfulness. We're being called to live in a life of dependence, that what you and I have, we've not earned. What you and I have, it's not been our own. For whatever reason, God has chosen at this point in time. Now, there may come a day we don't. There may come a day we're not the country we are. There may come a day. And maybe it's a way that we're taught humility. Third one is chastity. chastity. What separated the early church was this chastity. C.S. Lewis said this: chastity is the most unpopular of all the Christian virtues. See, the ancient world had total disrespect for human people. They had total disrespect. We had no value, especially if you were female, children, or slaves. So when Jesus came along, he brought value to all those people. And so they were sex objects. They were toys. If they died, they died. Nobody cared in the ancient world. And all of a sudden, we are lifted up. And because the believers had this value that the marriage between a man and a woman was so invaluable that we don't treat the slaves, we don't treat the children, we don't treat the women that way. We don't treat them that way. That chastity is what separated. The ancient world could not understand why this was happening. So Jesus brought value to the people. He brought this in such a unique way that nobody understood it. The fourth one, last one. What separated us? Charity. The spreading of the gospel, the number one way the gospel is spread in the book of Acts is because they met each other's needs. They gave out of pure hearts. They took care of each other. They gave of themselves first to the Lord, and then they gave and generously despite they were poor themselves. They had nothing, but they kept giving. They did the bake sales, they did it all. They gave all that they were able. There wasn't set amounts. They didn't give them giving goals. They said, give all you can. Give all you can when you can. They were determined to give the help that others needed. They just kept doing it. And they gave support and the whole work of the Lord. If they heard that the Lord was moving in this city or in this island, they were all in. They were like, if the God's doing it, then he must be blessing us and we must help. And they just did it. And this is the number one reason. The charity of the early church is the number one reason the gospel was spread. Can you imagine that in the first chapter, when the disciples gathered up and the Holy Spirit has moved, if they go out to preach the story and all the converts come together, and they said, now don't tell anyone. It's going to cost us some money. Let's stay around here. Let's get a committee together and talk about how to spread the gospel. I mean, what would have happened? Peter's head would have snapped off his body. This was about these distinguishing marks of who they were to live this holy life. Proverbs 30:7-9 says this: 2 things I ask of you, Lord. Do not refuse me before I die. Keep falsehood and lies far from me. Give me neither poverty nor riches, but give me only my daily bread. Otherwise, I may have too much and disown you and say, who is this, Lord? Or I may become poor and steal and so and dishonor the name of my God. Lord, give me whatever it takes to be dependent on you. See, there's a story that says, I'm only as sick as my secrets. That any sin that we keep secret creates a sinkhole in our life. We have to decide to win the character battles. We have to decide to win the character battles. See, I grew up in this little town, Pitcher, Oklahoma. I've told you this before, but just a little bit. It was a mining town. They mined lead and zinc, and it's estimated that 50% of all the ammunition in World War I and World War II came out of Pitcher. It was so heavily mined. There's a picture that's going to pop up. This is actually from about 20 years ago. Now, you can't see, you can barely see it, but the little white house with the green roof in the far left, that's my grandma's house. That's on top of one of those white chat piles. That's gravel, chat. And those surrounded that whole community. At that point in time, the town was about 1,500, maybe 2,000. But in its heyday, in the early 1900s, it was around 15,000 people. And employed about 25,000 miners were employed in this area in the early 1900s. And what they did was they mined heavily to pull out this lead and zinc to create the ammunition to go on to fight the wars. But by the mid-60s, they had stopped mining in this area, in this little tri-state area. Created despair, huge unemployment. Over 14,000 abandoned mines were left behind. The water supply was completely contaminated. It has become one of, if not the largest EPA natural disasters in the United States history. cave-ins all around town were commonplace. Roads would sink down. There's a picture I want you to see. This is one of the areas we used to ride dirt bikes. That was just a major cave-in that has created a water hole now. The ground began to shake at times and would give away. These sinkholes were common. They would pop up. In the mid-90s, the decision was made that the damage was irreversible. There was no more that they could do. Couldn't be done. It was no longer safe to drive. It was no longer safe to have school buses. It was no longer safe to bring in fuel tanks for the gas stations or heavy machinery. In fact, they decided it was no longer safe to live in the city or to be in the buildings, to go to the gas station. For about 1,500 people, this was home. So in the mid-90s, they decided, this government came in and said, we need to get everybody out of here. It's not worth it. It had been so overmined that the cave-ins were rampant throughout the city and through the little town. And just cave-ins would happen. This picture you're going to see, this is the town today. See, when we don't win the character battles, there's irreversible damage that can happen to us. Because we'll get to a point where we say, I can't fill in these holes anymore. It's not the first big decision. It's the thousands of little decisions that lead to it. It's the thousands of little decisions throughout our day where we don't win character battles. Living a holy life is calling us to say, like we saw in 1 Peter, that you are a royal priesthood. You are a holy nation. You are God's special possession. And He has called you out of the darkness to live in the light. He has called us to do more than we thought we could. So today, what I'm asking is, when we live this holy life, that we live a life of patience, humility, chastity, and charity. That we live different than the world.